At 15, I spelled please as P-L-I-S, and of course, spoke zero English. By 30, I was a certified C2 level teacher without ever leaving Brazil, my home country. By now, I must have helped thousands of people speak English more fluently as a teacher. But here's my confession. I never had a teacher myself. So in today's episode, I'm breaking down my journey from 0 to C2 level. My journey proves you don't need an English teacher to become fluent. But my story also shows why you should probably get a teacher anyway. Are you ready? So sit down, relax, because now it's story time. Hey there, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. In case you're new here, this podcast was created with the intention of helping intermediate and advanced learners of English communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and more awareness. If this sounds like something you want for yourself and your English, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. And if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just follow the show, because that way you won't miss a single new episode. So, about a year ago, I posted the very first episode of the podcast here on the channel. And in that episode, I share in detail my whole story of how I went from 0, A1 level, up to C2. By the way, if you want to watch my story in detail, I really recommend you check out that episode in case you haven't seen it yet. I'm going to leave the link in the description of the video for you to check it out later. But for now, just stick with me, because I'm going to briefly brush on some of my highlights as an English learner, but also talking a little bit about the need of a teacher. Should you get a teacher? Yes or not? So let's talk a little bit about that. Well, let's start from the beginning. The ordinary world, let's say. I was just another teenager, another Brazilian teenager, and I was just another statistic. Now, I shared in that first episode that about 95% of Brazilians don't know any English, and only 1% is actually really fluent. These statistics are from the British Council, by the way. Now, maybe that study is a little bit older by now. Maybe nowadays, with the advent of the internet and channels like mine teaching English on a daily basis here on a weekly basis and access to the internet, to courses, maybe these figures now in Brazil have improved a little bit. I would like to believe. Maybe instead of 1%, maybe 2-3% of Brazilians nowadays could consider themselves truly fluent in English. Even so, it's fair to say that in a country of almost 300 million people, the fact that just a tiny minority of that population speaks English fluently, that should tell you something. So there I was at 15, another statistic, all right? Now, one thing that I had back then that it was abundant was time. Time. I had abundant free time and flexibility as a teenager when I started learning English by myself. This is one precious resource that I know that maybe for many of you out there watching this now, you don't have anymore. Free time. And it was interesting because at 15 years old, for some reason, I realized that if I wanted more opportunities in my life, I needed to master the English language. I needed to learn this language. That's how my desire arose. But as I was thinking about my story with English learning a little bit deeply, I realized that as a teenager, I was always very introspective. As a matter of fact, I am a very introspective person even nowadays, believe it or not. But as a teenager, I used to love being alone, just with myself and my thoughts. I used to think a lot. Nowadays, I realize that combining my introspection as a teenager with the luxury of time, of free time that I had, allowed me to figure it out on my own from a relatively young age. In many ways, I feel fortunate for having realized the importance of English in my life early on, relatively early, at 15. Most people only realize how important English is in their lives later, once they are already grown ups in the workplace. They see the necessity of knowing English at work, but by now they are already in their 20s, well into their 30s, and then they start taking English learning more seriously. So I know that in that sense, I was very fortunate for having realized this relatively young, at 15. But here's the thing. I had a lot of free time back then to do that. Like I just said, that extremely enormous amount of free time I had with my introspective nature allowed me to come to that epiphany early on. But I know that for many people, that is not the case. Most people realize the importance of knowing English later in life. Then I applied the self-study approach. I started studying English with old course books and grammar books that I borrowed from a friend of mine. I didn't have a teacher back then. I couldn't afford a teacher. So self-discipline was my mentor. So I committed to studying English with those books 1 hour per day, including weekends. And I did that for at least a couple years. Now, you have to keep in mind that I was able to dedicate 1 hour a day, every single day, including weekends, to my English studies because I had no family obligations back then, no work deadlines, no children needing attention. It was just me and my borrowed textbooks. You see where I'm going with this? Also, in the beginning of my journey, I had to manage without speaking practice because I didn't have any conversation partners or any opportunity to practice English speaking. So it was just me and the books. Also, because of that lack of support in my immediate environment, I know that made me spend a lot of hours figuring things out that maybe a teacher could have taught me in just a few minutes. Let me give an example. Connected speech. I learned about English connected speech by myself, guys. I figured out these patterns over a series of months, if not years, consuming English content regularly. Back then, watching lots of DVDs with the subtitles in English, listening closely, pausing, rewinding, listening and repeating. And then little by little, I started to notice those patterns that native speakers always apply when they speak fast English. And then little by little, I started to put together all these patterns. It took me a long time to figure that thing out by myself. A good teacher would have probably explained all those patterns to me in a few weeks, in a month of classes maybe. You see? Now, this is actually one of the reasons why I created my pronunciation course, The Sounds of English. I took all the knowledge that I acquired on my own about connected speech, about English pronunciation, and I packaged it into a course that has a logical sequence, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and now it's available to you at a very low price, I would add. You see, so now you have the benefit of accessing that knowledge that for me took me months and years to get with a course that I put together. You see? So this was definitely a downside of not having a teacher around, a good teacher around. The journey took years, my journey to get where I am today with my English speaking and English level took years of consistent daily practice. And I know that for many adults, this is a luxury that you simply don't have. Then I started working my first job at 18 years old at a drugstore in my hometown. Now, even as I started working, I was still young, single, and I could dedicate my evenings and weekends to language learning. I lived with my parents back then. So most of the necessities of the house, my parents covered. It wasn't me, even though I was already working at 18. So all I had was time for myself. My only responsibility back then was to myself. So I kept studying on my own, even when I started working at 18. And then I finally became an English teacher at 21 years old. And I never stopped. I've been a teacher now for almost 20 years. Then I achieved my Cambridge Advanced Certificate, my C1 certificate in 2008. And then years later, in 2017, to be exact, I got my Cambridge Proficiency certificate, the C2 level. By the way, I actually have it right here. Look, this is my Cambridge C2 level certificate. By the way, to those of you haters and trolls out there who think that my level of English is not a C2 level, here it is. Here's my Cambridge Proficiency certificate. Now, this is the highest level a non-native speaker of English can achieve in terms of proficiency. It doesn't mean that once you have this, you're done. You should still keep studying and keep the contact with the language, but this is definitely the highest checkpoint or the highest victory you can get to as a non-native learner of English, speaker of English. And to those of you who still doubt my level of English, here's an invitation to you. Try this exam. If you think your English is so good, if you are a non-native speaker of English and you think your English is so good, try out the Cambridge C2 certificate. Do the test, do the exam, see how you fare, and then let me know later how you do it. So this journey of mine to go from A1 level, zero English, up to C2 level took me well over 10 years. It was a long journey to get there, basically from my 15 up to my mid-20s, even to early 30s. Looking back, I realized how fortunate I was to have had that time, all that free time available to me to actually make it happen. Yes, I had to work hard to get to this level. I had to be proactive enough to do it. But I also recognized that I had a lot of free time. I had abundant free time to make it happen. And here's also something that I realized in my journey. I also realized that I was fortunate enough to manage to always get jobs in which English was involved. My whole working career, my whole working life has been in English. I've been working at language schools since I was 21. For example, I started teaching English at 21 and I never stopped. But even before that, at 18, I got my job at the drugstore. That job didn't necessarily require English speaking, but because of the location of the drugstore, many tourists would come in. And then I would always help those customers by speaking in English with them. That was already a good practice for me, for my speaking skills, indirectly speaking. But then after that job, at 19, I got a job at a call center. And that job at the call center involved speaking with Americans on the phone 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. And I stayed there for a year. Now, can you imagine what that experience of speaking to Americans on the phone 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for a year, at 19 years old, can you imagine what that experience did for my English speaking, pronunciation, and listening skills? It helped me tremendously. And I was still young enough to absorb a lot of that. But again, I realized that that is not the case for many people. Having that opportunity to work with something so intensely like that, that involves English speaking and listening so intensely. Then I started teaching at 21 at language schools, and I never stopped. And this is also a bonus, I believe, because working at language schools allow me to work with other teachers, other experienced teachers. Back then, when I was more of a green teacher, like 20 years ago, I was more inexperienced. I still had to fix some things about my English skills. I had the privilege of working alongside other English teachers, native and non-native, who were more experienced teachers than me, who knew better English than me back then, and they would give me feedback about my language skills. Sometimes I would mispronounce something. A fellow teacher would just correct me or provide me with a tip here or guide me towards preparing for an exam. Maybe by taking a look at my writing skills before I sat the C2 Cambridge exam. So I had the luxury as well of working in an environment that not only required me to speak English every day with my students, but also I was surrounded by English teachers. And it was an environment that it was mainly focused on language acquisition. Why do I say this? Because even to those of you out there listening to this, even to those of you who work at a multinational company nowadays and that use English every day for work, native speakers in those companies usually don't care about correcting you. And I know because I've had that experience myself. I have worked in companies with native speakers. I've had students who work at multinational companies and who work directly with Americans or Brits or other countries. They don't really care about correcting your English. What they care about is running their business. So if they can understand you in a meeting, even with all the mistakes, even with all the inaccuracies, it's fine. They understand your message. Let's focus on doing the business. So the corporate world, I don't believe is a welcoming or encouraging environment for language acquisition. Yes, you get good practice, but you're not going to get to the highest level of proficiency you can get to if you just rely on the job you have. In my case, I was fortunate enough to not only work in English, but to be surrounded by a place that was all about language acquisition. It was all about English learning. And I had professionals from that area working alongside me. Now, I'm not saying that my journey was easy. Of course, it wasn't easy. To those of you who know my story, or, if you want a refresher, you can watch the first episode of my podcast here, where I go in more detail about my experience. It wasn't easy, but I also recognize that I was fortunate in many situations, in many events, and not everybody might have the same opportunities I did. So yes, I started learning English at 15 years old, a teenager. And most of the fluency and proficiency I have nowadays was acquired on my own, through my own initiatives. Yes, I had tons of help and support along the way, but I never had a teacher to achieve that. I never had a person teaching me for months or years on end. So yes, it is possible for you to become fluent in English without an English teacher. But let me flip this conversation now and tell a little bit about my current perspective. Because, the way I think nowadays, at almost 40, is totally different from the way I used to think when I was 15. So what is my new perspective nowadays as an adult? Well, today, my life looks completely different. I have a family. I have children who need my attention. I have work responsibilities and countless other commitments in my life. If I were starting my English journey today, at the age I have today, with the circumstances I have today, guess what? I wouldn't choose the same path I chose when I was 15. I would still study on my own, of course. But you know what? I would probably get a teacher nowadays, given my current life circumstances. So what I want to propose in this episode is something more balanced, because teachers are incredibly valuable. Yes, like I said, it is possible for you to become fluent in English without a teacher, but that doesn't mean that teachers are worthless. They are incredibly valuable. For example, teachers can help you accelerate the learning process. Having a good teacher can save you years of trial and error. I just talked about my pronunciation course. I took many months or even about a year, as I remember correctly, to figure out the connected speech patterns of the English language. Now, all this knowledge is available to you through my course, for example. So a good teacher can save you years of trial and error. I want to propose in this episode that you adopt more of a balance between self-study and professional guidance from a teacher. I still believe that self-study is perhaps more important than just having a teacher. I would say that 60 or 70% of the process is about your self-study, how you manage studying by yourself and practicing by yourself through your own initiatives. But having professional guidance from a teacher can expedite the process tremendously. And also remember that investing in professional guidance from a teacher makes even more sense when time is your scarcest resource. Let's talk a little bit about the time versus money equation here. When you're young, usually you are rich in time. You have plenty of time, but you are poor in money. You have very little or no money. If that's you right now, self-study makes a lot of sense, especially nowadays with YouTube and the internet and free resources online. But when you're older, and as you get older, you become rich in experience and even possibly money. You might not be incredibly rich nowadays as an adult, but you have money nowadays. You have a job, you have a career, you earn money. For sure, you earn much more than you did when you were like 17, 18. So you are richer in experience, richer in money, but probably poor in time. Now you don't have as much free time as maybe you used to have when you were in your teens or even 20s. So for you, the teacher approach makes more sense. Getting a teacher to make you accountable in your learning makes more sense. As a teenager, I traded time for money because I had plenty of the former and none of the latter. As an adult with responsibilities, that equation flips. Investing money in good teaching saves your most precious resource, time. Let me list some of the benefits here that you can get by working with a teacher. First of all, personalized feedback. This saves you months, if not years, of uncertainty. How is my English doing? What is my English level? I don't know. I have no idea. I can't tell you how many comments I get here on my channel, under my videos, of people asking about their level. Things like, Thiago, if I could understand 90% of what you said in this video, what does it mean? What is my level? I can't tell you how many comments I get like this here on the channel. Thousands. So having a teacher can take out the guesswork. You have a better grasp, a better idea and sense of what your current level is, and most importantly, what you have to do to move up to the next level. Also, a good teacher can provide you with structured learning that eliminates wasted effort. Instead of spending years trying to figure stuff out on your own, in a couple years or in a few months, you can make significant progress if you are working closely with a teacher. Also, a teacher gives you accountability, provides you with accountability that keeps you consistent despite your busy schedules. Now, I actually have a student like this. I have a private student who told me this flat out when we started having classes together. She said, Thiago, I need to pay for classes. I need to have this moment where I am with you here having the class because I know that just on my own, I can't do it. I'm already too busy as it is, and I don't have the mental energy, capacity, or even time to just study by myself. I need this moment here. So paying for the classes, having the classes, helps her remain accountable with her English studies. Now, who should say she's wrong in thinking that way? Also, a good teacher provides you with targeted practice that addresses your specific needs. A good teacher knows exactly what your blind spots are and provides you with plenty of practice opportunities in classes, in sessions, in content for you to fix those mistakes. And a good teacher doesn't do the work for you. They make your work infinitely more efficient. So here's my closing statement for this episode. First, I shared a little bit of my story of how I was able to become fluent in English on my own most of the time without needing a teacher. But then, in the middle of the episode, I flipped the script a little bit and also talked about the importance of having a teacher, especially if time is not a luxury for you anymore. So here's my closing statement. Listen. Balancing. Look, my journey proves you don't necessarily need a teacher to become fluent in English. With enough time, dedication, and resourcefulness, self-study can work. But that doesn't mean it's the right choice for everyone. If you're young, with minimum responsibilities and maximum free time, perhaps my teenage approach of self-study could work for you. But if you are a busy adult who is juggling work, family, and countless other commitments, investing in a teacher in a formal course isn't just helpful. It's the smarter, more efficient path. The older I get, the more I understand that time is our most precious resource. While I'm proud of my self-taught journey, I recognize that had I worked with a teacher, I might have achieved in 2 years what took me perhaps 5 or more to achieve. So yes, you can learn English without a teacher, but that doesn't mean you should. Choose the path that respects your current life circumstances, not just your budget. Sometimes the wisest investment isn't saving money, it's saving time. I hope you enjoyed this conversation today. Before we close this episode, let's jump into the Learner's Corner. For the Learner's Corner, I have here an audio message from Milena from Brazil. Let's listen.
Hi, Thiago. My name is Milena. I'm 27 years old. I'm from Brazil. The first time that I studied English, I was a teenager. I enrolled in a formal English course, but I didn't like the methodology, the teachers, so I ended up quitting a few months later. And 2 years and a half ago, I started studying again, but this time just by myself. And I'm not studying for the purpose of getting a better job or college. I'm just studying because I love the American culture. You know, I always was a curious kid. I became a curious adult. So I'm always trying to learn new things. And I'm a huge fan of the language, the culture. So yeah, I started studying again, just this time just for the sake of learning. And your YouTube channel has helped me so much. I enhanced my pronunciation, my listening, my grammar skills a lot. Grammar is a thing that I think that I should focus a little bit more, but I found myself making some ending mispronunciations. So I would love to hear from you what tips you have for me, and just keep doing your great work. And that's it for now. Bye.
Very nice, Milena. Thank you so much for your message. I have to say that your English sounds great. You have great fluency, great pronunciation, and great job for achieving the level you have today already. Your English is excellent. You know, you touched on a couple of things here that I think are interesting to mention. First of all, the fact that you tried a formal course in the past and you didn't like the teacher nor the methodology, and then you quit. That is definitely a downside of looking for formal courses and teachers. The truth is, I think that in every area, guys, okay, not just English teaching, the truth is that it is hard to find good teachers or good professionals. So that can be a challenge, like, you know, finding the right teacher to work with you, finding the right course that works with you. It doesn't mean that these resources are inefficient. It's just that, you know, there are lots of bad professionals out there, just like in any area. The great thing about YouTube and the internet nowadays is that because of the internet, we have access to maybe teachers and educators that we would never have access to without the internet. Like, for example, you just mentioned that my channel here, my videos have been helping you a lot with your English. That's great. It makes me very happy to know that. But you see, that is only possible because nowadays we have platforms like YouTube and the internet available. If we didn't have that, maybe you would have never heard of me, and you would have never learned anything from me. How crazy is that, right? So this is for everybody, actually. Do take advantage of the fact that we have technology and the internet nowadays. Another thing that you mentioned that I found interesting, Milena, was the need to focus on grammar. I absolutely agree with that. I think that people, they don't give as much importance to studying grammar as they should. I think that for some people, especially they start learning young, just exposure is enough for them to, internalize the language very well. But if you started learning English older, I really recommend you take some of your time to study the grammar, to study the structures. Now, remember, guys, the problem is not studying grammar. The problem is only studying grammar. That's the problem. So what I'm advocating for here is just, a few minutes of your week to a certain grammar topic that you struggle with the most or that you've never heard of. So make sure you set aside time for that. Now, as far as recommendations go, for you, Milena, maybe you could consider something more structured. I think you have already done a wonderful job of learning the language by yourself most of the time by following content online and things of that nature. But for example, if you still struggle with some of the grammar and even some of the pronunciation, maybe investing in private classes with a teacher, a course that deals with what you're looking for, or a structured program could be the next step for you. I don't know if you know about my pronunciation course. I don't know if you've bought it yet, but getting my pronunciation course could be a good starting point to help you with your pronunciation. And also looking for maybe a private teacher. Yeah, remember, investing money in a solution like that is never a waste of money. It's an investment in yourself, all right? But overall, I would say good job for the level you have acquired until now. And keep learning, keep studying, and keep following the channel here. It helps my work here on YouTube, to have engaged followers like yourself. If you guys want to do it just like Milena, you can send me an audio message by going to speakpipe.com/EnglishWithThiago, or you can send me an email at hello.teacherthiago@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Don't forget to learn more about my pronunciation course, but you can also check out my conversation club and my private community. These are all paid resources that can help you take your English to the next level. All the links are here in the description of the video, also in the pinned comment below, in the show notes if you are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave me a 5-star review because it helps my show on those platforms a lot. And if you are consuming it here on YouTube, like this video, leave a comment letting me know what you thought about this topic today, about this episode. Share this video with a friend who could benefit from this message and who's also learning English. And the more you engage with the videos here, the better it is for the channel as a whole. All right? I'm Thiago. I'm signing off. Thank you so much. And I'll be talking to you very soon in the upcoming episode. Bye-bye.